Welcome to the Faith Together podcast from the Center for Faith and Family at Olivet Nazarene University. If you believe that passing down Christian faith is essential for the next generation, you are in the right place. Enjoy conversations with guests who are faith practitioners, parents, caregivers, pastors, counselors, and many more. You'll enjoy practical tools and community for passing down Christian faith to your children and grandchildren. Welcome to the Faith Together podcast, and thank you for joining us today as we continue our conversation on ages and stages. As you may know, our goal in this series is to understand some of the best practices for passing our faith to our kids based on their age and stage. So as usual, I am with Lindsey. Of course, I'm Leon, but I am with Lindsey. So welcome, Lindsey.
Welcome. Hey, everybody. Great to be here. So excited for this conversation today.
Yeah, so we've done a couple episodes now on this series, right?
That's
true. We talked to your friend Michaela White.
Yes, Michaela
right?
White was our guest a few episodes ago as we talked about the early childhood stage. And she reminded us that even as young as infants and toddlers, children have so much to teach us about what it means to love Jesus and pass on our faith even at those stages. So that was a wonderful conversation.
Right. And then we moved from that to elementary.
Yes.
And we had two of your friends from your seminary.
Yes. I love how we're just like, and another friend. Said, I think this is a fun part of having a podcast is you can talk to all your friends about all the things outside of just ministry networking.
That's right.
Know?
And that was fun last week talking about elementary age group.
We talked about elementary school, and obviously a lot happens in that stage from kindergarten to fifth grade. And Danelle and Andy, friends of mine from seminary, we talked about how we can just take advantage of everyday moments in that stage of discovery as they have a lot of questions and they go in and out of discovering faith, just as kids go in and out of grief, they say, sometimes they'll feel the grief and then other times they'll be fine, and then it'll come back. And I think that's true about faith conversations with elementary kids. They can be really in tune and then just on to the next thing.
Yeah. And, one of the things we didn't mention that I think is pretty important, I don't think we mentioned it anyway, and that is that they're really literal thinkers in those early years of elementary.
Yes.
So when we're talking about who God is and Jesus and the things that he did, they're going to take things real literally. Especially things like when we talk about asking Jesus into your heart.
Yes.
I've stopped using that language because while it communicates fine for adults and communicates a great concept that is true, kids who are literal thinkers are going to think the physical heart that is in our body, that somehow Jesus
how does Jesus live in my heart?
In there, kind of the thing. And most of them have been around church long enough that they don't really say that's what they're thinking, and so we just assume they understand it. But it's not really until they get about fifth grade or so that they start this process of moving from concrete thinking to more abstract thinking, where they can think more in theory. Mm-hmm. And so they begin to understand what we mean when we say heart. That's our emotions.
That's true.
That's the place we demonstrate love and that kind of thing.
That reminds me of a story, real quick one, where I was teaching a few Sundays ago. And you know how you and I, when we talk about the Shema, we talk about Deuteronomy 6 and how, it's either when you're at home or you're not at home. What other time is there?
Yeah.
There isn't any other time. That is the time. So I'm talking to the kids, and we were looking at Psalms 139, which is another passage of scripture I really love. And for parents out there, I think it's a great one to read together. And we were talking about how God is with us when we wake up, and God is with us when we go to sleep, and God is with us everywhere. And I was like, so if he's with you when you wake up and he's with you when you're asleep, do you think how did I put it? I said, is there any other time that he wouldn't be with you? And they're all looking at me like, well, you didn't say at school, and you didn't say at my game, and you didn't say at practice. Right. And I was like, oh gosh, this is why this stage needs to inform teaching, so that I had to stop and say, you're right. I didn't say those things. God is with us in all of that.
That's right. Sometimes you have to be so clear because they have such creative minds.
They do.
And they're going to go places we never thought that they might go.
For sure. So that was a good reminder for me. And today we're going to go to our next stage of middle school. So that 6th to 8th grade range.
Yeah. So before we get there, we should also mention that next week we'll do high school.
Yep.
And then the week after that, we're going to talk about the ones that you and I work a lot with these days, and that's college students.
College students. Oh, yeah.
So each one of these stages, the way that faith develops in them is different. And that's why we're having this conversation. It's also why we're going to eventually sometime this year, create a curriculum that we've been talking about. We've created other series of curriculum.
Yes.
We're going to create a curriculum that will address these same 6 stages.
Yes. And I think
so that parents who don't listen to us here can go online and get small groups of parents together and say, hey, let's go through this together and learn about this.
Right. Or maybe you are listening and you want to dive deeper into this topic. The curriculum will do that for you. And I love that our curriculum will be available in the coming days for ages and stages where no matter if you're a parent in a certain stage or maybe you're a teacher or a coach, pastor, leader of whatever kind, working with kids and students, I think it's just so important for all of us to be informed developmentally of where kids and students are so that we can best serve them. So,
yeah, one of the fun things that started happening as we talk about these different topics in the series, I'm thinking back to the series that we did on screen safety.
Yes.
That's such a big topic right now. One of the things I'm finding is there are organizations that don't necessarily consider themselves to be Christian who are contacting us and saying, can you come and talk to us about this particular topic to the parents in our community because this is an important thing. So I've got a time next month where I'm speaking to a group of parents who fit in the birth to 5-year-old range that are not necessarily a Christian group, but they're just a support group. And I'm going to be sharing with them about the screen safety stuff, which I find I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I think there's so many on-ramps to what the Lord is giving us opportunity to do at the center of bringing in parents that maybe don't have a faith background, but they want to learn. Yeah. And screen time is one of those. Ages and stages is another one.
Yeah.
That's really, really cool.
That's great. Well, we've got a guest with us today.
We do.
And I'm going to let you introduce him since you work with him.
Okay, sounds good. So today, our guest is a great friend and also, as you said, Leon, one of my coworkers. Today we have David Morris with us. Welcome, Pastor David.
Thank you. It is good to be here.
David serves as the middle school pastor at Gathering Point, where I serve as children's pastor. And so we have neighboring offices. And when I was thinking through who we could bring on for middle school age and stage, I thought, why am I even questioning this? The person is right next door to me.
About 10 feet away. That's right.
Yeah. So that is where we're at here. But before we dive in, for you guys to hear more about David, I thought it would be fun for us to share a quick memory of middle school, Leon.
Oh, ouch.
I can start. You want me to start?
I'll let you start.
Okay. Mine is pretty quick, but one of the things I remember the most about middle school, which may sound a bit brutal, but I made it through, everybody. So really, I appreciate your concern, but I want to tell you, I made it to the other side. And it's this. I changed schools.
Ooh,
changed
that's a
schools.
Tough time to be changing schools.
Yes, changed schools in 6th grade.
Ooh.
But I'm telling you, is one of the best things ever for me because it forced me, one, to make new friends and to kind of go out of my comfort zone. And sometimes in middle school, we can just stay in our own little bubbles and not want to talk with others that are different than us because so much is changing inside of us that we're insecure to talk with others. But it was a great opportunity for me to make new friends. And I had my favorite teacher my 6th grade year. So she really inspired me to go into teaching and inspired me to work more with kids and all those things. So that was a great time. And then the other thing that happened along with friends in middle school, of course, so much happens, especially middle school girls. So much happens with friends and all the things that take place. with your friend group. But as I was trying to figure out who my friends were and all that, I had a friend that I would ride the bus with, and she gave me a note. Okay, this was back in the day where we would write notes to each other. She gave me a note and she said, "You don't know my friend Brittany, but I want you, you are in homeroom with her. Can you give her this note?" Because she was going to a different building than the building I was going to. And I was like, sure. And so I went over and delivered this note to a girl named Brittany that I didn't know and said, "This is from my friend Tiffany that I ride the bus with. She wanted me to give you this note." And she's like, "Oh, thanks." And that opened up a conversation that we sat at lunch together that day, and we're still close friends today.
Wow, look at that.
I know, but it just makes me smile because that's such a middle school thing,
It is.
to be like, "Can you go?" Now it's totally different because there's TikTok and there's Snapchat and all the things.
Yeah, my friend texted you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that is one of my fun middle school memories.
Okay, so when you say middle school, was it 6th, 7th, and 8th for you?
It was, yeah.
Okay, so I'm old enough that the term middle school didn't exist. So it was junior high, and it was 7th and 8th grade.
Okay.
So I've had to adjust in my ministry to this 6th, 7th, and 8th stuff. So for a long time in my ministry, I was responsible for birth to 6th grade. And then more recently here, as a part-time children's pastor here in the community, we've moved 6th grade into the youth group because that's kind of what's happening. And I think part of that is cultural change. Part of it is I think kids are developing more quickly. In some ways, not in others, but in some ways for sure. So it's 7th and 8th for me. And I just remember that being a horrible time of life. I just remember I was so awkward and backward, and it really was a hard age for me. So I attended a Christian school because I was afraid to go to public school.
Oh.
I mean, I'm glad I went to a Christian school, but the real reason, the hidden reason that no one else knew was I was afraid I was going to get beat up if I went to a public school. I just had that fear. I don't know where that came from. So, I struggled. And one of the struggles that I had was remembering things that I was taught. I mentioned last week that I was ill through part of my childhood. Well, that continued into my early teen years, and I was on medication for that. And in those days, I was diagnosed with epilepsy, but later doctors have told me I probably had a seizure disorder, but in those days they just kind of lumped everything into one category. And the medication that they had me on had two side effects. One, it caused me to sleep a lot, and the other was it stole me of some of my memory. And so there's lots of events from this age stage that I don't recall. Which is difficult because there's a lot of really important things you learn during those days, how to write, how to read well, those kinds of things. So I was a little bit backwards in that. But the one thing I do remember as a positive is that I really began to enjoy sports in this age group, and actually started to get involved in team sports kind of for the first time. So while school was very hard for me and I was kind of a backwards kind of kid and didn't fit in real well, and again, don't feel sorry for me. I'm fine now. But that's where my love for sports really started to develop.
I love our stories today.
Yeah, I know we have to defend
ourselves.
ourselves.
It's okay. I've made it through. I love that. David, are there any fun stories you would share about yourself at middle school before we dive into our topic?
I remember the battle at lunch every day in 6th or 7th grade was over Pogs.
Pogs?
Oh, yes. Those little round coins.
Yeah, I think started as milk caps in Hawaii.
Yeah, that's right.
But it got to be such a big thing that the teachers and administrators had gotten together and they kind of zoned off a section of the cafeteria for us so that we could have our Pog tournaments until there had been too many fistfights that they said the Pogs, don't bring them to school.
Yeah.
It was treated like a disease after that.
That shows how much different we are in age, David, because I remember when I was a children's pastor in Tennessee, Pogs became very popular. And because my family lives in California, everything kind of starts out there and then moves its way across the country. And so my mom told me about these weird things, and I'm thinking, oh, those are really cool. So she sent me a bunch, and then I found some from a Christian distributor as well with Christian things on them. And I started handing them out to my kids at church before they actually knew what they were. And so my kids were really cool because they went to school and they were kind of starting this whole thing out. So I remember Pogs when I was a children's pastor and you were a kid.
Yes, and my parents gave me Christian Pogs, and kids at school would beat me in the game. And if you beat someone, you keep their Pogs.
Right.
And they didn't want mine because it was Bible verses and Christian icons. And so they were like, what is this? They wanted something sports related, and I didn't have it.
Oh, that's really fun.
So it's a good reminder that in middle school, they're kind of trendsetters. Try these different things. You never know what could happen.
That's the real positive way to say it, that they're trendsetters.
Oh, man.
Oh, boy.
Well, we're just thrilled to have you with us here today, David. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, your family, and what you love to spend your time doing?
For sure. I am Katie's husband. That's probably the best thing I have going for me. And we live here in town in West Kankakee. We have 3 cats, no children, which makes my role a little different because I don't know what it's like to be a parent, but I do know what it's like to love on students. And that's a great privilege that I've had now for 18 years. This is year 18 in student ministry, for which I'm grateful. The only other thing I think I'd want to do is if they lower the standards to fly fighter jets. I think I would love to get on that and just fly humanitarian missions. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. If I had a free night, I'd probably try to watch a Baltimore Orioles baseball game. A free weekend, I'd go to our family farm in Indiana. And if I had a free week, I'd probably try to road trip to a national park somewhere and just spend time outdoors.
Oh, yeah. The great outdoors.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we are so thankful to have you here to share with us about the middle school stage. And as you said, you have been in youth ministry for 18 years. Mm-hmm. Wow. And I feel like youth ministry really should be like dog years, you know? There's just so much that goes down in 1 year of youth ministry.
And it, like children's ministry, it's changing all the time.
All the time.
Yeah, if you're out of it a year or two, you're out of date.
Yeah. So this isn't your, first trip around the block, so to speak, with students, with middle schoolers in particular. What would you say, as you think back on your experience, and particularly the last, few years post-COVID, that you love the most about this stage?
In the short window of time, we've kind of identified middle school here as 6th through 8th grade, the 12 to 14 range. And I would say for me, it's the massive disparity in personalities and temperaments and the types of students that you get in such a short window of 3 years. There's video still alive on the internet somewhere of a 6'6" 8th grader dunking on me one night at middle school ministry. And there are 6th grade guys who come in and are just about to break 5 feet tall, students who have all the courage in the world, those that are still very creative and playful, innocent little souls. And so just in that short window, you have students that are 14 going on 34, and you have some that are 12 and may have the childlike faith and attitude and temperament of a 8 to 9-year-old. And that's all there within 3 years. And there's just a lot of playful curiosity. As students are becoming more self-aware, they begin to kind of build up defenses of who am I becoming and are people going to like me? So there's a lot to handle there in just a short window.
Yeah, this is such a unique stage of life. And it's funny because, Lindsey, that a lot of my students are preparing for ministry students. And many of them are doing children's ministry. Many of them are doing youth ministry. But when you talk to the youth ministry people, for the most part, they're thinking high school. There's this middle school seems to, and I'm sure you've experienced this, David, middle school seems to be like almost that lost age in between children and youth. Part of it is maturity level, as you've mentioned.
For sure.
Some mature very quickly, others very, very slow. Those poor guys that are very, very short, and the girls that are in the same group with them are towering over them, and those kind of things. So, for someone to dedicate their lives to ministering to this age group, I think is quite an honor. I appreciate what you've done, David.
Thank you. It's also a blast. Yeah. I have so much fun with it.
Oh, I'm sure it's never boring.
Yeah.
No, every Thursday morning, I love hearing your stories from our Wednesday night programs.
That's right. Staff meeting Thursday mornings is usually just a little line item in there of what happened on Wednesday.
Yeah, it's always the best stories. And I can relate to somewhat in children's ministry, but I think a lot of times people are like, oh, you're a middle school pastor? Do you enjoy that? And I think it's important, just like those of us that work with children, where they're like, oh, that doesn't sound like fun, for us to say, actually, it is a blast. There is so much joy to be had. Yeah. It is a challenge, but I think it's important for us as advocates for each of these ages and stages to identify the joy that is found in each one. So I always appreciate that about you, David, when we have these conversations, that there is just so much laughter and wonderful things to appreciate about middle schoolers, kids, wherever we find ourselves. Yeah.
So in your many years of ministry, how are you seeing faith being passed on to this age group? What is unique about their faith development that our listeners should know about?
This is not a phrase that is unique to me. I've stolen it from people who probably stole it from others, but more is caught than is taught. Middle school students can do a phenomenal job at mimicking the behavior that they see in others, whether it's their peers or other adults. And so just our ability to offer a Christ-like example for students, the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. If we are going to call them to a high standard, set the bar high, we need to give them an example to follow. So that would be the first thing. The second thing, especially in the middle school phase, is when parents can begin having more meaningful conversation about faith-based issues. I have a number of parents who call it windshield conversations because it's often happening after they've been picked up from practice, from dance, from an after-school extracurricular activity, from youth group. And for some, it's that intentional 10-minute drive home. Might be the most focused conversation they can have. But the ability to actively listen, put down that smartphone, turn off the TV, look your child in the eye, be an active listener, be willing to wrestle with doubts. Students have a number of incredible questions. And I don't know that it's our job to have every answer except to say, let's find out together. And so the ability to do that, I think, goes hand in hand with passing down faith to the next generation. And then another way I've seen it lived out locally at our own church is when families serve together. And they can see mom or dad putting into practice the things that they're talking about at home. And so those are just a few of the ways I've seen faith get handed down to the middle school phase.
You said something that really caught my attention. You just kind of mentioned it in passing, and this idea of doubt that kids have. One of the things I've experienced is as kids move from that 5th, 6th grade year into the youth group, I find that many of them really do have questions of doubt. I've also found that they have been around the church. Many of them have been around the church long enough that they know they're not supposed to voice that because of the way they might be perceived if they had doubt about whether God's real or did Jesus really die on the cross or is any of this stuff really real. And I have found that giving them an opportunity to voice that and realize that that's part of the learning process. Whereas if they keep it to themselves, they're just going to internalize it rather than voicing that out loud. So I'm curious as to experiences you've had with kids that have expressed doubt, what you've encouraged parents to do or what you've done with them as you've helped them maneuver through those periods of their life.
For sure. Part of that doubt is driven by the access students today have to information. I remember as a middle school student in the mid-90s, if I wanted to look something up, I either went to the Encyclopedia Britannica or I had to sit through the dial tone of our family computer connecting to AOL.
And even then I remember those sounds.
Yeah, even then it wasn't fast. Today, students can look up anything and everything, but that also gives them access to different opinions, ideas, thoughts on religion and race and human sexuality. And these are all topics that they are being confronted with even in the middle school phase. And so one of the ways that we allow students to wrestle with that is we essentially treat our small group time within middle school ministry as an opportunity to voice those doubts and different thoughts and opinions. And our small group leaders take time to practice not being surprised. Like, don't have that look of shock of how dare could you think this, but take the time to smile, nod, and consider it. And I would encourage parents to do the same thing. Just take it in stride. This is not your world falling apart or crumbling before you, but be glad that your child is actively thinking through these things and that you can continue to be a voice of truth, a kind, loving voice of truth that doesn't downplay their doubts, but instead takes time, as I mentioned earlier, to consider this together. Turn to Scripture. What does the Bible have to say about this? What are some of the things that our church has taught on this particular topic or subject or whatever it might be?
Yeah, so how do you feel about like parents broaching those topics on behalf of their teens? So like, for instance, coming to my 7th grader and say something like, hey, I understand that at school they probably talked about LGBTQ things and you probably have some questions on that. How you feeling about all that? Initiating those conversations, you think that's a healthy thing?
I think it's a great thing. I think it's better for parents to be proactive than reactive. Here locally, it was just about a month ago that one of our local junior middle schools, 7th and 8th grade, whatever you call that, we call it the upper grade center, but they had the school assembly where they talked about suicide. And it was on a Wednesday, and so talking to some students that night, some of them said that, I don't know if this is a topic I can talk about with my parents. What do you think? I think the earlier we have those conversations, the better off it will be, because parents, I think in the elementary phase, have positional authority as parents, but it's the middle school phase where you start to see the rise in relational authority. And middle school students are looking for people they can relate to, not people sharing truth just because they have the authority to do so, but people that they can sit and have a conversation with. So anytime we start having those conversations sooner as parents, and I would definitely caution 2nd grade is probably not the time to do that. The sex talk or issues of human sexuality, race, that kind of thing. Obviously, each child is unique and different, and I would trust a parent's judgment to know when the right time is. But those are not conversations I would delay just because of the awkwardness or the difficulty. I would jump on it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I would suspect that our kids probably know more than we give them credit for when it comes to a lot of these
for sure
social topics and they're
difficult. Already looking at it. If you've given them access to a smartphone, they are already looking at those things. One of my favorite things to do, maybe it feels awkward to the students, but nobody's pushed against it, is let me see your YouTube history. And what are the things that they're watching? A lot of kids are watching stuff about Minecraft and Taylor Swift and kind of the other popular cultural issues. But there's some difficult topics that they're being confronted with already in 6th, 7th grade if you choose to go that route with a smartphone. And that could be an entirely different podcast series, one that I know you guys have already covered with smartphones.
Yeah.
So listeners, go back and check out that stuff. But it's definitely something that you want to be aware of and the things that your kids watching and listening to.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing you say, too, is that even though these are hard conversations to have, what a privilege it is to be the first voice in it with your kids. Doesn't mean you're the only voice, but your voice because of the investment you've put into your child up to this stage and them knowing, like you said, the positional authority you have had to keep them safe, to show them love and care, to build that trust together so that when these conversations happen, your voice is a respected one to them. And even if they feel nervous about having the conversation, it's important for us as parents and caregivers to show them that we aren't nervous and we can have these conversations and to model that with them.
Right. Yeah, I think one of the reasons we hesitate to start those conversations is we're afraid we might be introducing a concept to our kids rather than responding to something that they've heard. And the truth is, even if we are introducing the concept, and we probably aren't, truthfully, who better to talk about those conversations than parents.
Yeah. Yeah. And I loved a phrase you shared, David, of when you have those doubts, when you have those questions, well, I don't know. You may not know as the parent, as the caregiver, but let's find out together. And we talked a lot about this last week as well, that faith, that's what our podcast is called, Faith Together, because we are better together. We are better in discovering life with God together. And that is such an important practice for kids to see in modeled faith, that we don't have all the answers and they can know, oh, when they didn't have all the answers, they said, let's figure it out. Let's go to God's word. Let's talk to people we respect. Let's do this together. So when those times come that your child, your student doesn't have the answers, they know they don't need to figure it all out. There's, it relieves that pressure of, I have to know all the answers. Like, okay, we can figure this out together. We can ask God in these specific ways. And so I think that's a really practical learning and tool during this stage as well. Appreciate that. So as we wrap up this conversation, so much good stuff. We could just keep talking,
we could
huh?
keep talking.
Yeah. What would you want parents to know? One thing to take with them about this middle school stage.
And you can do subtopics, and that all counts as one.
There we go.
So if you have if you have like a header
I have
and
an
then
overarching
subtopics,
theme, yes, with 34 subtopics, so that I can say 34 things. The one thing that comes to mind to leave listeners with is the idea of find your five. Find your five. In this middle school phase, students are developmentally and naturally wanting to start to gain freedom, kind of become their own person. And when it comes to parents and guardians and caregivers, students have been known by those individuals their whole life. And really what middle school students want is for someone to discover them for the first time in the middle school phase. And so I would task parents and guardians and caregivers with identifying 5 other voices that a student can begin to develop relationships with. So find your 5, identify your 5, pray for your 5. 5 is not necessarily a magic number. It comes from some of the teaching of Chap Clark, who was a professor, theologian, a pastor out on the West Coast. Again, his stuff has made it this far east at this point. And he has a lot to say about the influence of non-parental voices in the life of a middle school student. And so students need people that show kindness and warmth and welcome curiosity. And so it could be that it's a baseball coach and a dance instructor and a Sunday school teacher and a neighbor or an uncle or a cousin or whomever. Some of those voices may be significantly older. Others may be closer to almost being considered a peer. But find your 5. Find those voices in your child's life and help to cultivate that relationship. Because the time is going to come when a middle school student isn't necessarily going to want to go back to mom or dad or grandma or grandpa to break the news or to ask the tough question. They're probably going to feel it out first with one of those other individuals. See how we respond, because ultimately they don't want to disappoint or surprise or shock the parent or guardian. They want people they're going to show love and grace in the midst of something that may be difficult to talk about.
Yeah, I like to think of this. I love that. Find your 5, but like building your roster, right? So when you think about a bench at the basketball game, like who do you have on your roster, on your bench that you want to put into the game for your child that you would trust?
Yeah, and Lindsay, I'm sure you recognized immediately that that's one of the top 10 best practices of passing on faith that we have discovered, and that is finding people in your student's life, child's life, that will speak truth into them that are not their parents.
Yeah, some call it faith friends, some call it faith-focused adults. Chap Clark, as you said, David, is a great voice to this. Also, Kara Powell and Sticky Faith is another. Yes, is another great resource, which I can put on our website for everybody to be connected to. But just a great way to help faith to stick, and for you listeners to not feel alone in it, to feel supported in it as well.
Well, some of the things I heard today is that middle school ministry is relational, that informal teaching as we live life together, which we talk about quite a bit, is a significant player in this. And then helping surround your kids with people who are faith voices that could speak into their lives that are not you, their parent. So I think those are all really good things. And as you said, boy, we could probably talk on this topic for a while.
We really could.
Yeah.
There's
so
so
I
much
think we've
to
just
say.
started to scratch the surface, but I think that's a good start for us, and we may find that we need to come back to this at another time and expand on some of the concepts a bit. But for now, I think this is a good place for us to end this conversation, at least for now.
Absolutely. Well, David, thank you so much. It's been
thanks
great
again
to
for the
have you
invitation. Appreciate it.
have
Yes,
you with
thank
us
you,
on the
David.
podcast. And
One more thing before we go.
Mhm.
David, what year did you graduate?
I'm a 2005 graduate of Olivet Nazarene University.
And you did youth ministry?
Youth ministry, yes.
Did you have me for any classes? So I arrived in 2003, so you wouldn't have had Christian Ed. You would have already had Christian Ed with Dr. Wine by then, right?
Yes. Prof. Wine was my primary professor. He was also my advisor through my undergraduate education, but I don't recall any
I
classes
think
we
we
had together.
just like passed ships, so to speak, on that. So I came in 2003, you graduated 2005, so you would have been a little further in the program by the time I arrived. So I was going to take a little bit of credit because he did an excellent job today.
He really did.
Yeah.
He really did. Well, listeners, we hope that you can just take this conversation, share it with those in your life that would find it valuable, and we hope that it provided you some encouragement. And we're excited for next week as we look into the high school stage.
So we always end with the same phrase. And I hope for those who listen regularly, this just doesn't become the way we end our podcast. I hope you really hear these words today. May the Lord bless you, keep you, and give you peace. You've been listening to the Faith Together podcast from the Center for Faith and Family at Olivet Nazarene University. Sign up for additional resources at centerff.com. When building faith, we are better together.